Chapter 14. Chapter 14. As we're eating lunch, something in Grace's mood changes. I don't normally make a habit of being nosy, but given the fact the bond, and not to mention the wolf inside me, won't let me leave the poor girl alone, I don't exactly have a choice. I feel her reaction as she reads the letter at the very top of the pile, and when she casts the rest aside, I assume it wasn't the tender greeting card she may have expected. What's your family like? I ask her. It seems like they really miss you. Because I was the only one without magic, I ran the business. It was kinda my whole life, so I assume they only miss me because my sisters have to pick up the slack. Judging by the way she crinkles her nose, she seems to dislike her sisters quite a bit. How many siblings do you have? 5 sisters, she says. I'm the youngest. I think in some families that would actually mean something, but for me it just meant all the magic ran out before they got to me. They called me the runt. She takes a massive bite of her sandwich, presumably so she doesn't have to keep talking about her family. Do you have siblings? I shake my head. My parents were never around much when I was younger. They kind of just let me be. I think they regretted having me and decided to never screw up like that again. So here we are. Were they? Grace gestures vaguely at me. Like you. I know she's not talking about my looks or shining personality. She's undoubtedly meaning my lycanthropy, which elicits the most questions when I meet someone for the first time. A well-connected werewolf from money. Unheard of. I shake my head. What happens with a lot of wolves is that the gene becomes recessive. Certain circumstances have to occur for the gene to become active. So many people live and die without ever turning. Lycanthropy is choosy that way. How do you mean? She asks. I mean, you don't just wolf out when you hit puberty, I answer. She thinks it over, obviously confused. I know we don't normally advertise the circumstances in which a werewolf gets his or her powers, but she's been reading enough werewolf books that I would have expected her to figure it out by now. Unfortunately, it seems that she doesn't know. How do you become a werewolf? Do you have to be bitten? She asks. Even if you're bitten, you don't necessarily turn. You also have to. You have to kill someone, Grace. The only way to become a werewolf and unlock the gene is to kill someone. I don't know why, but it's always been that way. She seems oddly okay with the fact I've just admitted that I've killed someone. She keeps eating lunch like I haven't said anything out of the ordinary. Relatively unfazed, she asks, does that mean every single werewolf on campus has killed someone? I nod. It's not necessarily murder. We're not psychotic. Self-defense. Sometimes, such as manslaughter, you have to be directly responsible for someone's death to turn into a werewolf, but the how varies for all of us. Poor bastards. I know what she wants to ask now. Bond or not, it's written all over her face. The question sparks curiosity across her features, flickering in her eyes. I was in the military, I tell her. When I was 18, I wanted to get as far away from my father as I could. It was a job that would get me the hell out of town the soonest, so I jumped at the chance. I needed to kill time before my trust fund was released, so I put my name on the roster and never looked back. Unfortunately, my whole unit was blown sky high just weeks after we got there. I got the luck of the draw with where I was sitting. Pretty much everyone was in pieces or immobile. She sucks in a breath, her eyes softening. Her lips form my name, but no sound comes out. I know she can see that I don't want her pity, and I don't want her sorrow. Sure, what happened was tragic, but it's the same story for every guy who fights overseas. Even if it's part of the job description, you can never prepare for what life actually looks like when your boots hit the ground. My friend was pinned. We were getting shot at, and he didn't want them to take him hostage. The shit they do to the ones they catch is much worse than if they kill you outright, and we both knew it. He asked me to kill him, and so I did. Her face is a mix of things at once. Grief, anger, confusion, indignation. You saved a man from a fate worse than death and were cursed for it? A lot of people don't mind their condition, but I never asked to be a pack leader. I only wanted the life I knew. For those who grow up around magic, who never know anything else, it's easy to accept the change. I had no idea what I was, and my parents were gone before they could find out. If it wasn't the middle of the day, I'd probably be itching for something stronger than water. Thorn may be weirdly okay when it comes to mating bonds, but I think showing up to one of my lessons intoxicated would probably be his line in the sand. I'm sorry, Rome, she says finally. I know you don't want to hear it, but I'm sorry. I can't imagine what that must be like. Headmaster Thorne was also someone who was turned later in life. It's why he asked me to teach here. I think he believes it'll help me to feel more connected. I've never had an interest in building community or whatever it is he's peddling, but as a favor to a friend I couldn't refuse. Why do you show up every year if you don't enjoy it? I shrug. Honestly, I've never been able to come up with a particularly good reason to say no. Thorne makes a compelling argument. If he didn't have to contend with the urge to munch on a normie every now and again, I think he'd make a good lawyer. She finishes the last of her sandwich and starts to wander through my living room, running her fingers along the spines of the books on my shelf. Her brows knit together as she confesses, I don't really know why I'm here either. I think I was just tired of doing the same thing over and over again. I wanted to get out of town and be myself for a second. And you discovered your magic, I remind her. That alone makes it worth it. Does it not? I still don't know how to channel it toward anything or use it. Just kind of happened as a result of lust? A racing heart? I'm not sure what the word she's looking for is, but she seems to get quiet, too quiet. Frowning, she sighs. What do you think made it happen? There were flowers in the spot where you almost got mauled, I reply. Maybe the fight or flight response brought it out for the first time. I assume it was just dormant before. But why did it start again when we were kissing? She asks. She falters a bit on the last word, as if she's embarrassed to say it. Heaven forbid we sleep together, then she'll really be flustered talking about it. I'm sure it's just that you don't know how to control it yet, I say. When children are first learning magic, they do a number of things when their powers run wild. Because you've never used your abilities before, I'm sure. Your magic decides for itself when it wants to be active. Just about practice. How do I practice? She asks. She's fidgeting with her hands, twisting them in her lap. I mean, it's not like I can visit the tutoring center. They're not here for novices. I can do my best, I say. Maybe putting you in touch with your magic will make it easier to find a means to break the bond. It's worth a shot, right? She nods to say, right. We end up sitting down on my couch. In the afternoon sun, strands of her hair seem to catch on fire. Even if she has the darkest curls I think I've ever seen, they glow in the light. There's something about her in golden light that makes the wolf howl. It's all because of the bond, of course. Sure, Grace is a beautiful woman, but that attraction is heightened because of the bond between us, and when we figure out the right spell to cut the tie, I'm sure I won't feel the need to look a little too long anymore. It happens when I feel overwhelmed, I guess, she says, scrunching her nose. It's cute seeing her puzzled. Or with you, my heart was beating so fast. Was like I had all of this energy with nowhere for it to go but out. So we have to make your heart speed up? I ask. I raise a brow at her, and her face glows red with embarrassment. She nods. That might work. I reach for her, gently cupping her face in one hand. She leans into the touch, but her breath seems to catch in her throat. I gently run my thumb over her lower lip, settling against her chin. I'm a couple of inches from her, breathing the same air, so close to her the world feels small enough to contain only the pair of us. Can I kiss you? I ask. She nods. I lean in, brushing the seam of my mouth against hers but keeping the pressure light. It's a gentle touch, but enough to trigger something. That makes her reach up, grabbing at the collar of my shirt to bring me forward. Now our bodies are flesh as are our mouths. She kisses me hard, and it ignites a spark within me that makes me ache for her. I deepen the kiss, sliding my tongue against hers to play a different song, one that makes her cry out while resting her legs around my waist and tugging me down to her. We kiss, and we don't want to stop. Our mouths seem to have a mind of their own. The world melts away completely until all that's left is us. It's incredible the way everything spins as we come together. She moans, and I catch the sound in my mouth. She pulls me closer, her nails pressing through the fabric of my shirt. As my hand slides down her neck from her face, I realize her heart is beating fast again, like a rabbit's. I pull back from her, marveling that her mouth is swollen and her pupils are blown, as though she's coming down from a high. She grins at me, pushing a hand through my hair at the nape of my neck. Slowly, as she turns my head, I notice the ivy creeping through the window. When she wiggles her fingers, the vines wrap around the outside windowsill. The way the leaves and flowers bloom. Almost looks like they're waving at me. Finally she stops. Wow, that's really cool. I don't think that'll ever get old. Do you have other nature witches in your family? She nods. Mom is like this. It's why we have the greenhouse. Of course all of my sisters have always enjoyed plants, but they were never focused on it. Magically, one of my sisters is like Paige with her divination. Everyone has their own calling, but no one ever turned out quite like Mom. Except you, I say. She'll be so proud when you tell her. Grace frowns. I'm not sure I want to, honestly. Like I wanted my parents to be proud of me for the things about me that weren't magic. I never got that growing up. If they were proud of me now, it would just prove what I feared all along. I never cared much about what my parents felt for me one way or the other. When they weren't paying attention to me, my dick of a father left me alone. For as long as I can remember, I never yearned for my parents the way some kids do. I don't need their validation. Hell, I don't think I've ever had any desire for it. I can't imagine what they would think of me now if they could see me. Considering I become a monster when the moon is right, I imagine my father would be horrified. I'd say having monstrous qualities just means I take after my old man. What if we can't break the spell? She asks. Like what if there's no way to separate us from the bond? Are we supposed to just wait for death to come to us? We could try to seal the bond. We owe it to ourselves to try. I sigh. Maybe she didn't get it before, but nothing is as simple as trying to avoid fate or manufacture emotions that aren't there. That would require us to be in love. I know, she exclaims in frustration. Come on, I don't think we really hate each other all that much. People fall in love in a shorter amount of time with lower stakes than this. Maybe we could like each other enough. Find something to bring us together so we can survive. I don't say anything. I don't want to burst her bubble and tell her that thinking we can outsmart something centuries in the making is downright impossible, but surely she's not naive enough to believe that. It's not that I hate her or can't imagine loving her if I really wanted to, but I swore off opening my heart to anyone a long time ago, and I'm not about to start now. No, I'm not capable. Are you really so arrogant you won't even consider a plan B? She demands. No, even worse, you're fucking around with me for nothing more than physical attraction. Here I was thinking maybe we could consider an alternative, but I've been imagining your real feelings all this time. She doesn't give me a chance to get a word in edgewise. I'm not sure what I could say that might be comforting, but I will try if she gives me a chance. Instead, she shoves her letters into her bag in one swoop of her arm and storms out before I can even get my thoughts together. Fucking hell. She really is an impossible woman. Chapter 15. Grace. I don't think I could feel more humiliated than I do right now. I've been hit like a train with an impossible burden. Life as I know it will end unless I can figure out how to break the bond between us, and I'm pretty sure I've nearly finished every single book in the school's library. Between the two of us, if there was an answer to be found, one of us would have figured it out. From what I can tell, a mating bond can't be broken, only ignored. Unfortunately for us, none of them have a prophecy of imminent doom to contend with. I'm not sure if the fact he's an alpha wolf makes it harder to disregard the bond, but it feels like no matter what we do, everything in the world is out to make sure that we don't turn our backs on fate, no matter how much we're trying, no matter how hard we work. I feel like an idiot when we were kissing, and it seemed like for a moment that the chemistry was going to boil over. I thought I saw something in his eyes, some spark of affection that made me think it could be possible for us to fall in love, or at least reach a level of intimacy great enough to make sealing the bond possible. Maybe that was all some kind of far-fetched dream. I guess I'll be throwing myself into research even more so than before. If the stakes are as high as he says they are, and there's no option but to defy the natural order of werewolves, I guess I have no choice but to do everything in my power to break our bond. I end up back in my dorm, electing to skip my afternoon class. At this point, I'd like to be as far away from Rome as possible, but it doesn't seem like I have much of a choice. There's only so far I can run. Paige gets back from her afternoon lesson with a smile on her face. She's already preparing to launch into a story, but when she sees me, tucked into my blankets and tearing through books like a crazy person in need of an exorcism, she stops cold in her tracks. What happened? She asks. Your aura is all over the place. Are you okay? I don't even know where to start. Theoretically, I could tell her about a prophecy she can't remember or a crush on a man who wants nothing to do with me, even though the fates will kill us if we don't figure it out. Instead, I ask, "What do you mean when you talk about auras?" She tilts her head, obviously surprised by the question. To me, auras are like colors around a person. When I was little, my normie teachers thought I just had synesthesia. Your colors are all messy right now. They're super inconsistent, which tells me you probably need a drink or hell maybe 5 of them. Yeah, well, it's complicated. She sits down on the edge of my bed, slowly tugging the library book out of my blanket nest. You've been focused exclusively on werewolf books, and your aura turns this nasty green color when you lie about it. Is something happening with you and Professor Frey? Is that what's upsetting you? I know I can't lie. I also know that whatever pain she initially sensed is heightened by hearing his name, and it probably cut through my aura so plainly that it answered her question for me. Still, I sit there weighing my options, wondering how much she knows and how much I should tell her. I figured something weird was up when I was in the library and I ran into him, she says. He had this look on his face. I know it well enough because in the very few times I've delivered a prophecy, it always resulted in me blacking out and the person hearing it staring at me like I've shot them. Didn't think a guy like that could be unnerved. Well, I assume hearing someone will die unless a chronic loner gets laid probably is a shock to the system on any given day, but especially when it comes from a student you barely know. Then you started doing research and being unable to look the guy in the eyes, she says. So many girls have weird crushes on him, but he ignores them and blows them off. With you, he steals glances. Hell, I think he called on you in class the other day just to make eye contact with you. I'm pretty sure it's not a one-sided thing. I was hoping no one could tell I was clearly crushing on my professor, but Paige's keen eye seems to have stopped me in my tracks. Whatever hope there was of that is long dead. It's only a matter of time before other people start to notice too. Are you his mate? She asks. Is that why you're reading all these books about it? I blush, feeling surprisingly exposed. It's a little more complicated than that, but yes. He knew right away, but it also wasn't as simple as I would have liked it to be. There's a prophecy, and we have to break the bond or else. I'm not sure I'm willing to get into all of the semantics, so I get the point across by dragging my thumb across my neck and making a clicking noise with my tongue. Hopefully that gets the point across. She sighs. That's heavy. Tell me about it. She reaches into her backpack, brandishing a bottle of strawberry wine. You want to get wasted in the astronomy tower? A few of the vamps invited us. I should say no, that I need to get back to my hopeless reading assignment. But that doesn't happen. Instead, I'm consumed with the weight of the world on my back, worried about everything happening around me, and all I want is an escape. So I agree. The astronomy tower is one of the highest points on campus, much like our dorm. The sheer amount of stairs between this dorm and there is a mind-boggling number, but Paige challenges me to a race that has me breathless and laughing. The vampires aren't flushed in the face or out of breath. Anything, they look at us like we're putting on a show. If I had the advantage of being undead, I'm sure leg day would be a breeze. The astronomy tower is like a step backward in time. Designed much like an old observatory, there are maps dating back hundreds of years rolled into scrolls, a massive towering telescope in the center, and plenty of tools for calculations and direction. Not that the purpose of this visit is astronomy. I'm pretty sure a compass is currently serving as a beer coaster. I wouldn't normally be here, but I can't help the need I feel to get the weight off my chest. Tomorrow more books and studying can take the place of whatever I'm trying to avoid right now, but tonight I get to do whatever the fuck I want. I'm not sure how many drinks I have between all of the bottles being passed around, but pretty soon the world is spinning like a weather vane, and whatever I was worried about becomes background noise that slides away. After the party, and an embarrassingly long trek down the astronomy tower steps, I find myself out in the forest before I can talk myself out of it. I'm less drunk, but there's enough alcohol in my veins to make me feel emboldened. This time I'm hellbent on not running away. He's going to talk to me whether he likes it or not. As I'm knocking on the door, or rather banging on it, I'm so frustrated and angry and hurt all at once. Hey, Rome. It takes him a second to get to the door, presumably because it's late on a school night and most people are sleeping, but eventually it swings open to reveal a very shirtless Professor Frey in gray sweatpants, rubbing sleep from his eyes and glaring at me. Why the hell are you at my door at 2 o'clock in the morning? He demands. He sniffs, clearly picking up on the wine even through the screen. Are you drunk? Not anymore, I exclaim. Cardio made me run through my buzz. Now I'm just tipsy. Wanna have a nightcap? I hold up the bottle of bourbon I carried in. Don't remember who I snatched it from, but I decided it was good as community property. No thanks, he says, but he opens the door regardless. I walk past him, temporarily blindsided by the smell of his cologne. When he places his hand between my shoulder blades and steers me to the couch, I'm awash with a concern that is most definitely not my emotion. He sits down beside me, offering me a glass of water. I take it, but admittedly I prefer another drink, because when his eyes get all deep and soulful on mine, it makes it hard to remember that we're doomed and whatever feelings I have for him are too. I thought you were done with your days of partying in the woods, he remarks. This was on campus, I reply. And besides, the woods are only dangerous during certain times of the month. I saved your life twice, he reminds me. For you, I think the risks are greater. He might be right, but given that he hurt my feelings by declaring there was no hope of having real feelings for each other, I don't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing he's correct. If I had it my way, I'd hex him silly. But I don't know how, and I'm pretty sure a bond like this precludes me from intentionally harming him. Damn it. So what brings you to my door? He asks. Besides the fact you wanted to drink with me. Originally I wanted to yell at you. I huff indignantly. I don't understand why you think falling in love is out of the question. We've combed every fucking book and there are no answers or solutions, so I say the only thing we can do is to find a way to beat the system. Are you so scared of opening up that you'd rather die, or worse, let me die? I would never let anything happen to you, he says immediately. Don't think for a minute that I would. I will protect you with my life, so if anyone is killed by this curse, it'll be me. My failures are not your burden, you have to know that. I don't know anything about you, I reply. You don't let anyone know anything about you, although I think the reason for it is that you don't even know yourself, Professor. You spend all your time studying history and magic and everything that exists outside of you, but you're so afraid to know what's underneath all that anger and hatred you'll never examine yourself. I know I'm out of line, even if I can feel that I'm picking a scab. I'm so close to the truth that it fills him with anger, I won't stop. It's like I need to rub it in to make him see what he's been missing the whole time. You're right, he says. But I think what bothers me the most isn't that we're bonded, but that you've only been around for a matter of weeks and already seem to know me better than anyone else in the world. You could let me love you, I murmur at last. We could save ourselves. He doesn't say a word. I'm not sure he knows what to do, but he seems to be sucking in these measured breaths, and when he looks at me, an ocean of emotions rushes through the green of his eyes. More than anything, all I can feel is warmth and terror, but the sort of terror that comes with a roller coaster or a first kiss, the kind that's almost safe. He sighs. Then he says, "Fuck it." The desperate exclamation from his mouth startles me, but even more the way he takes me by the waist and kisses me as hard as he can, sends a flurry of fireworks through my belly. The electricity crackles down my spine. When our lips meet, his warm and slightly damp from taking a sip of water, I can taste his spearmint toothpaste, the residual drinks from my party, all coming into a cacophony of flavors. He runs his hands through my hair, twirling it around his fingers and using it to pull me to him so I'm in his lap and straddling him. He grips my hips, pulling me until our chests are flushed and there's no space between us left unoccupied. He reaches for my shirt, fiddling with the hem of it as though daring to ask if he can take it off. I answer by lifting my arms, and he drops the fabric to the ground in a heap. His fingers run along my back, my shoulder blades, finding the divots in my spine. I gasp at the contact, exhilarated by the way he finds new ways to touch me and explore my skin. Send me a light. Oh my God. He lifts me effortlessly and begins to carry me to the bedroom. When my back meets the cool sheets of his bed, I reach for the band of his sweats, untying the waistband strings until they're loose and his pants sink lower on his hips, revealing the toned V-lines that appear sharper in the dark of his bedroom. He starts to kiss my neck, working his way down, nipping and licking and teasing until I'm so overwhelmed by desire that my toes are curling every Nerve ending in my body seems to be at attention, aching for me. Are we doing this? He asks as my fingers tease the band of his sweats. All I can do is nod. He unclasps my bra, and as new parts of me are revealed to his mouth, he kisses and swirls his tongue around my most sensitive parts, eliciting cries from my throat that I muffle with a hand clamped over my mouth. When he finally moves down my stomach, following the curve of my navel, I'm squirming as he pulls down my panties, and when he kisses me lower, I almost come undone. With one touch, he knows exactly how to make a girl writhe. Everything about his tongue where he kisses, sucks, and pulls culminates in me feeling closer to the edge, my body tensing then winding up, waiting for him to finally make the move that'll cause me to explode. When I do, crying out as he rides out my bliss with me to the end, everything comes into focus. God, he feels amazing. He knows exactly what he's doing. As he pulls back, slick with the taste of me on his mouth, he asks the question again. All I can say is yes. There's no going back from this. Once we've slept together. But as he's rifling through his nightstand for a condom, I couldn't care less. Chapter 16. When I was younger, my mother always said I should be careful about the decisions I make because many of them cannot be taken back. I don't think I ever truly understood the gravity of this until I found myself hovering over Grace Sumner, feral and wanting, as she looked into my eyes, pushing the hair off my forehead with an unsteady hand. I almost left the condoms at home, but I figured I might need to give some out to some students going for a reckless romp in the woods. Hell, was I wrong? I roll one over myself just watching her as she waits beneath me. When I finally push inside of her, feeling her warmth and heat, the wolf howls with a relief I've never heard from him before. He seems all too happy to be here. Claiming her. I have to push him back before he takes control entirely. There's something so right about how we fit together, and as our hips roll until we find a rhythm, I'm overwhelmed by how destined this moment feels. I have a hand on her face, forcing her to look at me as I move inside her. She keeps her eyes on mine, moaning as she meets each thrust. My thumb rests on her bottom lip, and she sucks it gently, my name falling from her mouth like the most sinful prayer. Rome. Oh, Rome. I know I won't last long. Especially not with the wolf, who's so overwhelmed with his enjoyment of this moment that keeping myself in check is almost impossible. I know she's getting closer because I can feel her tightening around me, urging me closer to the edge until I come so hard there are almost stars in my eyes. I'm kissing her as she finds her own release, crying out into my mouth as we kiss, and her nails dig into my shoulders. Several moments, an eternity passes before we're recovered enough to talk. I lie down beside her, the condom discarded into the trash by the bed, and together we stare at the ceiling, watching the cracks in the plaster as though it might change. She moves, her fingers running along the scars on my arm, feeling each ridge. Are these from the war? She asks. Not overseas, I tell her. I joined that one to get away from my father. He's the asshole who gave me all of those scars. Whenever he was angry, he would put his smokes out on my arm or burn me with a lighter. He was a big believer in corporal punishment. Unfortunately, he was also a sick fuck, and he never knew when to stop. I know he'd find reasons to punish me sometimes. So when I got big enough, I never came home. She gently presses each of them, and the movement feels almost like an apology. The wolf gave me a few scars too, he says. Whenever he gets particularly upset during a transformation, he takes it out on our body. He'll scratch his own face, whatever he can reach. I think it adds to my reputation, to be quite honest with you. Every scar is a new story for someone to make up. And fuck, do I have a lot of them. Some of them are small, like the cigarette burns. Others are deep, long marks from claws gouging. I became an alpha by beating the old one in a brutal fight, and I have those scars too. I never meant to find myself in a leadership role, and the fight was a product of my hard-headedness more than anything else. Those scars are some of the biggest ones, and she's finding them now. I twirl a lock of her hair around my finger absently. It isn't that I don't think I could love you, Grace, it's just that a mating bond is permanent. Once sealed, we're not only bound to each other, we're primed to have the strongest love two people can have in the world. A wolf loves forever. He never forgets. And he never stops. I think there are worse things, she says softly. You can't spend your whole life alone, no matter how hard you try. Maybe that's what a bond does. It keeps an alpha from isolating. I bet that's why it can't be broken. A mate is usually another werewolf, I tell her. I know you're beautiful and smart and a firecracker, but while all of those qualities make you lovable, you're not like me. We can't deny that no matter how much I try. Witches and wolves have a rivalry that dates back centuries. The first werewolves were cursed by witches. It's such an ancient part of magical mythology that most people forget it or treat it as a distant part of the past to be seen, but not heard, never given consideration or the time of the day. We were born out of a blood feud over land, and when a witch cursed the first wolf, he transformed and ripped her to pieces. I would never dream of harming Grace, but the animosity of the bloodline will always live in the back of my mind. I can't deny my nature, nor the truth of what I was created to be, no matter how much I want to. For the same reason that werewolves and vampires are never mated, wolves and witches never get paired. What's happening here isn't just unprecedented, it feels practically impossible. I've never seen this kind of thing happen before. I think ancestral anger is a bunch of crap, she says. What happened in the past doesn't have to define what we do now. It doesn't matter where we come from, it matters what we feel. Right. In theory, yes, but nothing in life is ever as simple as deciding what you want to do when fate has other ideas. I wish I had her optimism, but I've been on the wrong side of a war, chasing death like a drink at last call, burned and beaten in every way someone can be. I'd be lying if I said I believed my first instinct was to say people were good, because often it felt like I was only ever looking at monsters. I don't think you'll love me when you know what I've done, I dare to tell her. I wouldn't normally admit it, but something in the bond is urging out every ounce of honesty I have inside of my body, and it spills out before I can fight it. It has to go both ways, and while I'm failing miserably at keeping myself away from you, I know it's different for you. I can't place the look in her eyes, but I know there's an unmistakable warmth, a softness that wraps around me like a cocoon. It's as if she's telling me I don't know the first thing about what I'm describing, even if it's me we're talking about. Let me try, she says at last. Just let me try. The next morning she's gone before I wake up. I know she has classes, even if she's probably going about her morning hungover as can be. There's coffee in the pot on the counter, still hot and miraculously not cooled into a lukewarm sludge. She's left me a note that says only 2 words. Thank you. I'm not sure the proper response to sex is a thank you, but it's also not the worst thing she could have said, so I'll take it as a victory. There's something about knowing she was there, have increased my pillowcase, that makes the wolf quieter today. I can still smell her shampoo and perfume around the cottage. Sharper even though she's not here anymore. The bond is stronger between us. There's no denying it, the cord tying us together is almost tangible, and I'm certain if I focused I could find her on campus at this exact moment. I don't want to, and if anything I'm a bit unnerved at the capacity to use such magic, but I'm so aware of the possibilities. I head to the staff lounge before my first class, hoping to get some papers graded. I would have normally tried to work at home, but the smell of her around my place and the memory of last night is making focusing on anything other than the thoughts of being buried inside of her an impossible feat. Grace is in everything I do, for better or worse. One of the other werewolves, an older woman named Denise in a pack from upstate New York, eyes me the second I walk through the door. She narrows her amber gaze, focusing on the air around me knowingly. She's an alpha too, which means she's even more attuned to me than a normal wolf would be. She peers at me over the frames of her glasses, wary as I sit down with my stack of papers. Your bond is different, she says. Have you been consummating, Romulus? I nearly cringe at her choice of words, but out of respect, hide any facial expressions I am inclined to make. I don't see how that's any of your business. Given Miss Sumner is a student here, I would say it is. Does Thorne know that you're sleeping with her? I sigh, pinching the bridge of my nose. He's been encouraging me to avoid fighting my bond since the year began. He's right to do so, she says. An alpha wolf cannot ignore the bond when it is called. I noticed you did your best though, given the sort of books the two of you were checking out at the library. My head snaps up from the first paper, attention diverted. What? My mate is the head librarian, she says with a chuckle. The second I discovered you had a mate on campus, we made a bet about whether or not you'd attempt to reject the call. If you weren't an alpha, you might have been able to. I'm glad you've decided to give Miss Sumner a chance. She's very bright. I would appreciate if we didn't talk about my student around other staff members, Denise. She waves a hand dismissively. They're not werewolves, so they won't understand it. And besides, you can refrain from all that shame you're harboring. Having a mate is a beautiful natural process. Denying yourself that connection is a ridiculous denial of your nature. I'd rather deny my nature. Everything about lycanthropy is about control, fate, but never my choice. I wish I could decide for myself what I want or desire for this life, but a centuries-old curse made the choice for me long before. Everything I've done on behalf of the wolf, including becoming a pack leader, was an instinct. Just once I'd like to know what I want or feel. Would I be interested in grace? Would I choose to become a wolf? There's no telling now, given that every option has waned to non-existence. Just once I'd like to meet another wolf who doesn't love their condition and wishes there was another path. I've come to be comfortable with myself, but it doesn't mean my affliction doesn't eat away at me from time to time. The eclipse is next week, she reminds me. Perfect time to seal the bond so you can stop moping about it. I'm not moping. She knows it, judging by the look on her face. She tops off her coffee before she leaves me alone in the staff lounge, staring down at the quiz with Grace's name on it and a whirlwind of questions in my mind. I can only hope that none of the student wolves pick up on the bond now that it seems to be lighting up like a beacon. I suspect that if Denise is seeing how obvious it is, other students may give her a hard time about it. I don't care what they say about me, but I care what they say about Grace. She deserves better than rumors. From the moment I began teaching here, I was always the center of school gossip, but knowing that gossip now contains another person, especially a woman already fighting for respect among her asshole male peers, it doesn't feel right to be complicit. I know there's no way to mask the bond, so all I can do is hope no one picks up on it. Grace is quickly getting to the top of the class. I know she came in at a disadvantage and has been reading and studying much more than everyone else to get to where she's performing now. But if other students notice what's happening between us and see her improvement, I imagine their theories will be unkind and untrue in equal measure. I find myself thinking about her as I read her short answers to the pop quiz. In the loops of her handwriting, I see the curves of her lips, the way they form a bow at the top of her mouth. In pencil shavings, there are the freckles on her shoulders. When my breath hitches, all I can think about is hers. All things Grace consume my mind like an inferno. I'm falling in love with her already. The wolf knows it, and he won't let me forget. I can only wonder if she knows and if she's seen the signs. I know that I'm a dangerous person to fall for, and the thought of her cutting herself on my edges makes me want to pull back, but it's too late. Both of our lives are on the line, and Denise confirmed my fears. We're going to have to take a new path if we want to save ourselves. I'm not sure how I reached this point, how these events fell into place, but I know that once again destiny will make the choices for me, and all I can do is pray I don't get burned again. Chapter 17. The bond is different now. I would be lying if I said I couldn't feel it the moment I woke up in his arms. I'd never had an intimate experience with a man like him, let alone one tied so heavily to magic. It was everything I'd imagined and somehow all the more terrifying. The term for Pacific Academy is shockingly brief. By the time I feel like I've truly learned enough to get my footing, the eclipse is right around the corner, and classes will end. I'm not sure what comes after this. Professor Frey and I have avoided discussing it. While we originally agreed on getting our sexual attraction out of the way, out of our systems, it's becoming impossible to ignore that it feels like more. That's a dangerous train of thought for sure. I don't have a lot of experience with men, but I assume thinking about the person you're casually sleeping with in a more romantic light can be dangerous. I mean, even without the soulmate thing. Sure, we agreed to try to fall in love, but I'm nervous. It won't be enough, or worse, it will, and I'll be devastated when it ends. Paige and I are walking out of our final magical history seminar when Professor Frey catches my eye. Miss Sumner, a word? Paige gives me a knowing look. She wiggles her eyebrows with an expression I attempt to ignore. I haven't told her what's happened, but she's seemingly pieced together most of it, at least enough to harass me when I come back to the dorm late, or more often not at all. The second the classroom door closes, Rome takes me by the waist and kisses me. I expect a chaste peck on the lips, but he goes for a slow, deep movement. That makes my toes curl in my sneakers. His fingers fiddle with my skirt, but he doesn't do more than that. Just kisses me. When he pulls back, a grin on his mouth, I'm sheepish all at once. Professor. You don't have to call me that anymore, he says. This was my last class. And yours. We are officially done with the academic term. And I'm only Rome to you. Maybe Romulus if I'm in trouble. I'm not sure what trouble entails, but with that smart mouth of his I'm sure I can fill in the blanks on my own. Did you keep me after class just to kiss me? He shakes his head. As you know, a bond is sealed under a full moon. When the eclipse happens, we'll be able to seal it just before I transform. There's the masquerade ball beforehand, but we can leave an hour or two in. I don't want to deprive you of an experience. I don't care all that much about the experience. With my sisters being so much older than me, every milestone felt pointless. Nothing mattered. Especially not with their lives so much bigger and more important than mine. Don't care much for tradition. I felt nothing about prom or high school graduation, especially given the fact I was doing it all without the magic of my coven. The eclipse ball is a tradition. Granted, there's not always an eclipse. Sometimes it's merely under a moon, but regardless, it's a masquerade. It's a formal event, he says, brushing his hands across my cheek. You have so many beautiful dresses. Did you bring one for the dance? I didn't know there was one, I admit, shuffling around on my feet. He seems genuinely puzzled by this. Everyone gets an orientation packet. I wouldn't be shocked if my sisters intercepted mine and threw it out, or burned it with a hexing spell to hit me with some bad luck. For the first time in our lives, I had something they didn't. I wouldn't be shocked if revenge was sought after to even the score. No wonder I showed up without a clue what I was doing. I can call in a favor, he says. Some students go home before the party. A lot of wolves prefer to turn on their home territory. Puts them at ease. In any case, the wards will be down and the gates open, so I can order a dress and have it delivered. I frown. That sounds expensive. He waves his hand dismissively. Money is no object. If I had access to the internet on campus, I may search his net worth online. I know he inherited money because he told me as much, but comprehending it as a definitive amount and not just an abstract value seems beyond me. I've never been rich. I've only ever bought my own clothes or worn Stacy's things when she got tired of them. The thought of having something new, a dress designed for me, is something else entirely. I'm excited at the thought. The idea of him peeling it off of me later is enough to make all of the blood rush to my face. You don't have to do all of this for me, I tell him sheepishly, shifting from foot to foot. But I do, he says. I want everything to be perfect that night. It has to be. I know what he's not saying. The time we've spent together curled under the sheets and blankets of his bed like we could escape the world, or better yet, hide from it, has taught me to understand what he keeps to himself. When words fail him, what is he avoiding? I want everything to be perfect in case the worst happens. I want to give you fond memories if it doesn't work and I die. I want to give you everything. Because I love you. An ocean of emotions cuts through his green eyes. All of them seem to be bubbling, fighting for whichever one will break the surface first. Paige has been teaching me how to read people, but I can only reach his emotions through the bond. I assume it's because we're close. When it comes to him, all the psychic barriers I have seemed to melt. Each time we touch, another wall is knocked down. He's so close. Are you scared? I ask. Of the moon? Of what could happen? A muscle ticks in his jaw. I'm afraid of the ambiguity, Grace. Ambiguity. The word echoes in my mind until the letters jumble and scatter like Scrabble tiles. I am not afraid of death, he says. I've been face to face with it, and it doesn't fill me with fear the way it might scare someone else. But when it comes to you, losing you and knowing you could be hurt scares me. The prophecy didn't say I would die. I'd feel better if it did. No, the consequence of my heart, which never seems to align with my mind, that treason is what I'm afraid of. It's strange. I can feel how much he cares for me, but I can also feel how much he doesn't want to in equal measure. It's like he wars with himself over it, as though tearing himself apart could stop the inevitable. What's going to happen will happen. Once I read from Stacy's tarot cards. They told me all about the man I would love, his secrets, how someone or something could tear us apart if I wasn't careful. I know all too well the risks, but I've already fallen for him. I've doomed myself, and if I die for love knowing I felt it once, I would say I lived a life well lived. But I will ensure nothing happens to you, he says. We'll seal the bond. We'll save ourselves. If we're fated mates, it should mean it's easy to break the chains holding my heart hostage. Maybe I just don't even know it yet. Maybe I agree. He can't lie to me anymore. I tell him that much, but I don't see how it could be constructive reminding him of his failure to comfort me when whatever he's saying simply isn't true in any case. I'll send your dress up to your dorm tomorrow, he says. That way you can surprise me before the moon. I force a smile on my face even though deep down I'm worried about him. About whatever is happening in that mind of his behind his troubled eyes so green the first could get lost in their forest. As I take the winding staircase back up to my dorm room, a million thoughts are racing through my mind. What is death like? Could I live without Rome? Could I live knowing I could have tried harder to save him? What is going to harm us should we not seal the bond? What would it feel like sealing the bond and breaking my heart? How did I get to this point? Should I run now while I can? Why have I fallen so easily when it seems like he can tee? That one is the largest doubt circling my subconscious. Why? Paige is sitting on her bed when I get back into our room, fanning out her cards on the comforter in a colorful pile. She has a few tarot decks, but her favorite one is colorful as all hell, and the details on each card are stunning and whimsical. So you two are coming to the ball, right? She asks. I mean before he wolfs out. I nod. I assume so. She grins. I have a glue gun, if you want to customize your mask with me. I never understood the point if everyone knows everyone anyway, but the tradition is kinda nice, I guess. I'm excited about it. I could agree to whatever she wants at this point. I feel like I'm underwater, trying to make sense of a sea of feelings and thoughts. Does she know she delivered the prophecy? I doubt it. I'd rather not tell her in case it all goes sideways. If anything were to happen to me, Paige would beat herself up about it for the rest of her life. I'd hate to put that on her. Do you want me to read your cards? She asks. Whenever I don't know what I'm feeling, I like to read my cards. They give a lot of clarity. You seem like you could use some clarity, and I hate to see you all broken up. I sigh, sitting down on the edge of my bed. I feel ridiculous now in my tiny sundress, the black lace bunching around my thighs. When I bought it, I thought it seemed like the perfect outfit for a witch to wear, almost like a Halloween costume. Wearing it now I feel silly, like a silly girl in a silly outfit. She offers me the stack of her cards like an offering. I painted them myself, so you know they're legit. She waves the deck again, urging me to take it. Slowly passing my fingertips over the backs of the cards, feeling the ridges of where they've been creased and folded. One jumps out first, the Tower. Nice. I don't even need to be well studied to understand what that one means. The spread comes as I shuffle the cards first, like a traditional bridge, then fanning them out over my hands under. The cards are clear. All of them point to the same conclusion of struggle, adversity being in line for hardship. The Wheel of Fate is the final one. Paige pulls. She almost seems puzzled as she looks at it, holding it in the light of the golden hour of the sun. She turns it over a few times, and whenever she moves the light seems to redistribute in the flecks of the paint. It's clear it doesn't know how it wants to be read. It's in your hands, she finally says. It's unspecific, sure, but I understand how it applies. Whatever happens is in our hands, contingent on what we do, how we act. Paige leans forward, studying my face with her scrutinizing gaze. She has this way of looking at people, sometimes that cuts like a blade, sharp and direct and intelligent. Her eyes seem to notice everything. When it comes to witches like Paige, their talents are just as much in what they feel as what they see. Wow, she says, you really like him. She studies me, then shakes her head. No, more. You're in love. It's why there are sparks between you two. As crazy how obvious it is. I'm surprised no one else noticed. Or maybe they did. But they're too afraid of him to say anything about it. When Paige starts to pick up on something psychically, she seems to fall into a trance of sorts. Her verbal pattern seems to trip into a snowball effect, an avalanche of conclusions being drawn like atoms colliding in her eyes. As brilliant what she does, how she sees things in other people they may not necessarily pick up on, but it's also a bit scary how she disappears into it. Her magic, like most witches, controls her more than the other way around. It's not that simple, I reply. We've been. It doesn't matter. The fact is, after all of this is over, when the term ends and everything, there's nothing left for us. We'll be as good as strangers. I just have to accept it. I say it, but I don't feel convinced. I can't tell her everything, of course, but I want to spill my guts. I want to preemptively feel my heart break before I have to deal with the full scale of it. Eventually it'll be like a punch, squeezing all the breath from my lungs. I don't get it, says Paige. Why would he give you up if he loves you too? Before I can process the words or ask her to repeat them, even a knock sounds at the door. She's out in the hallway, chattering with whatever group of friends happens to be on the other side, and I'm left to contemplate. He loves you too. Funny how we got here. He read me the riot act from day one in class, and now, all of a sudden, I'm thinking about a future if we could even have one. Or what it would be like to be bonded to a werewolf. I think about how he's opened up my magic and how I feel so attuned to Lady Hecate and Gaia, Mother Earth, such that suddenly all the years where it was radio silent for me magically doesn't matter. There's a confidence he gave me that I can't even begin to describe. And she knows. Paige can see it, why can't I? Fucking hell. He's somehow weaseled his way into my life and now I can't fathom what it would be like if he vanished from it. We were strangers just 2 months ago, and now our lives are forever intersected, even if it was doomed from the start. I wish it were so simple as asking Paige about the prophecy. More clarity would be great, but given she doesn't remember it, it's a dangerous thing to wonder about. All I know is, come tomorrow night, one way or the other, everything will change. Chapter 18. Chapter 18. Rome. I ordered her a dress from a boutique down the mountain. I had to make some calls to find a good one, considering my only parameters for a dress were not ugly and expensive. It ended up being far more complicated than I expected. When it finally arrived and was delivered to her door, I spent the rest of the day wondering what she would look like in it. I gave them no instructions. I wanted to make sure everything would come together as it was fated to, and granted, my experience with intervening in difficult situations is limited and notoriously poor. So I gave them little to work with for the dress and trusted that when the time came for the beautiful woman to whom I'd given my heart to wear it, she would look extraordinary. I brought a tux because I like to have something for black tie events on hand at all times. The older I've gotten, the more I've clung to the human aspects of myself and the impressive things I could control, my clothes and my money. I can't hide the scars from my transformations or pretend I don't run with the wolves monthly, but I can certainly dress myself up. I wore my first suit when I was a kid. It was a custom-fitted funeral outfit for a grandfather I didn't know. Or maybe it was an estranged uncle. I don't find myself worried all that much about it to this day. I just remember how itchy it was around the collar and how every button in class made me feel like I was being sent to the gallows. The tie alone was like being strung up from the gallows. I've worn a suit a few other times since then. I wore my military uniform when it came time to bury my friends and give their weeping wives some semblance of support, assuring them that their last moments were quick and painless. The explosion would always replay in my ears, causing them to ring before I ever heard the replies of their desperate spouses. When I wore a suit last, I was accepting this job, meeting Thorne with a formality we haven't seen again. This time I feel okay. Knowing who's waiting for me makes it worthwhile to put the suit on. The masquerade ball is in the auditorium. All the chairs have been removed, leaving the floor open for dancing. On the stage, a large band of musicians are playing a chorus of classical music. The event is so formal it feels like another world. The masks are comical, a formality at best that maintains the tradition. It's not like they truly obscure anyone's features. I can identify every student from my class, especially from the way they titter nervously as I part the crowd of people. The students are all dressed to the nines, but I can't be bothered to acknowledge any of them. Even as some of the girls try to catch my eyes, I'm focused on the faintest smell of Grace's shampoo before she comes into my line of sight and steals the breath from me. The wide staircase that opens into the ballroom reveals Grace, and the dress makes my heart stop beating in my chest. I'm pretty sure it elicits the same response from others because the room grows quieter, stopping to stare. She's wearing a sapphire gown, strapless and revealing the expanse of her clavicle, the curves of her cleavage, and the way her shoulders arch delicately seems to explode with color and glitter, the lace in her skirt fanning around her. She looks like she's about to take flight, or maybe she's already floating. The entire room is watching her, waiting. Maybe this is how I die. Unable to breathe, I am captivated by her. Feel like I've fallen suddenly. Or maybe it's just that I've finally noticed how I've loved her all along. Whatever it is, I'm so in love that it is impossible to ignore it. The cord between us twinges as though to remind me. I told the seamstress to pick something elegant from their collection and asked a witch from the staff who runs an elective course to make it fit to the wearer's proportions. It wasn't like I could ask her for a specific size, since the only words I know to describe Grace's body are perfect, elegant, and small enough that scooping her into my arms feels like no task at all. When her eyes fall on me, her face breaks into a massive smile. Her eyes sparkle through the mask, which is of a white lace that somehow accentuates the dress perfectly. She walks down the stairs toward me and people move to allow her through. The whole moment feels like a scene straight out of a cheesy movie, and I want her to have every second of it without hesitation. You look amazing, I tell her. She grins and sheepishly covers her face with her hands. This old thing. The music swells around us, and I offer my hand to her for dancing. I'm not sure Grace realizes how many people are envious of her. The way she looks in that dress alone elicits enough stares that I know she'll be the talk of the town all the way home. Some of the other boys in the room are jealous of me for being near her, able to touch her and bring the softest sounds from her lips. I've never cared much for music, but as we're listening to this song and moving across the dance floor, I'm wishing it would last forever and never stop playing, and we would never have to leave this perfect euphoric moment. Grace is such a captivating woman, and she doesn't know how much power she holds. I learned a very simple waltz when I was young, my parents being as pretentious and affluent as they were demanded excellence from me for as long as I could remember. Their merciless sculpting meant classes in all of the hobbies they wished upon me. No matter what they were or if I was even interested, I was expected to be the perfect son, the one who followed the pattern and did everything I was ordered to do. I lead Grace in the same sort of dance. She follows easily, even in the shoes she wears, which have a tall heel that increases her height considerably. Makes her willowy, her frame much taller in this ensemble. She's at once intimidating and startling in her beauty, and everyone is watching her. I know we're creating a spectacle announcing our relationship this way, but I can't think of any other way to keep things undercover, and I don't want to. I want to show her off, twirl her around, tease the edge of where her backless dress dips into her spine. As we dance, I'm memorizing the way she smells and the blush on her cheeks. Even with the mask that brushes her cheekbones, I can see the blood bubbling under her skin to make that signature blush of hers. When the song is finally over, she takes my hand, rolling her eyes at the other students who are still staring relentlessly in our direction like they can't believe what they're witnessing. We've been so careful thus far, but now that there are no formalities of professionalism and no need to pretend we aren't madly in love, I can't keep my hands off of her. She leads me out the back doors of the auditorium into the garden. She steps onto the cobblestone path. It's like all of the plants rise to greet her, the world around us opening up in vibrant shades of green. Where are we going? I ask her. She shrugs. I figured we could take a walk. We had our dance, but I think I'd rather just be with you if that's okay. Of course it's okay. I can't imagine why it wouldn't be. All I want to do is be alone with her most of the time, but especially now when I'm wondering what it would be like to bunch the skirt of her dress around her hips and bury myself in her. I know I can't yet. There are traditions to follow when it comes to sealing the bond, and I'm doing everything in my power to stay restrained. We have 3 hours before the moon is at its highest point and before the wolf runs. For once, I'm not filled with a sense of fear or dread. I'm less afraid of the damage to my body the wolf creates because I know that at the end she'll be there waiting for me. It makes me less inclined to fight the change. I think I'd like to go to college, she says. Chuckle. That was a little out of the blue, don't you think? Grace shrugs. I guess. I mean, it's just that I was thinking about how much I've enjoyed studying here. I had good grades in high school, but with the family business and the fact I was always disappointing them, it just seemed like I couldn't leave. I was shocked when Mom told me to come here. Where were you thinking about going? She glances at me, and her cheeks flush. With nervousness. I mean, there are some amazing schools everywhere. I guess. I was wondering if I could be near you. Wherever you are. I'm floored by her admission. I knew we were getting closer and maybe there was a chance of us becoming more than just a summer fling, but to hear her say, it makes me feel like it's so much more real. She's so hopeful, biting the edge of her lip and rolling it between her teeth. Okay, I say to her. Whatever you want to do, I'm here. She grins. My hands frame her face, slowly moving the lace mask from her eyes. She takes mine into her hands, setting it on the marble fountain. She leans forward, her mouth colliding with mine in a slow embrace, like a gentle dance. Not unlike the one we had shared. I'm awash in her. Her dark curls, her eyes, the way she reminds me of smoke. It's like I'm clinging to the idea of her, begging her not to slip away. Seems so obvious now how the pieces fell into place to bring us together. Spent a while with my head planted firmly up my ass, and now I see the consequences. Now I know what I missed. She smiles, and I feel the seam of it just before we break apart. Tell me something, she says. Are you ready to seal the bond? I nod, casting a glance to the moon, which has begun its ascent into the sky. I think so. She squeezes my hands one more time before letting go. Instead of following me out of the garden and down the winding path that'll bring us into the forest, she turns toward the dormitories. I have something for you. I have to get it before, well, I won't be too long. Let me come with you, I start. I can. Meet me in the clearing, she requests. She's got her skirt hiked up around her ankles, her high heels clicking against the path as she makes a beeline for her bedroom. I'll be there in a minute. One thing I've learned about Grace Sumner is not to question her. When she says she's going to do something, I trust that she will. Telling her no or urging her not to do something, well, it's not exactly in her vocabulary, and it doesn't crack the top 10 of acceptable responses. I figure that her word is final, so I head into the woods toward the clearing. There's something different about the campus when the gates are open. There's normally a magic that hangs in the air, so heavy it's almost stifling. Feels like the summer humidity, a force that reassures and protects. The moment the wards are down to allow cell service, and many students are leaving before the night is over. Being that I'm an alpha and I know the woods well enough to avoid leaving them, I'll be the only wolf turning in them tonight. It also gives us perfect privacy for sealing the bond. We have to, well, mate under the moon just before a transformation, and when the deed is finished, she'll bear my mark. Whatever that means. I've only ever met one other mate pairing, but they were both wolves. What we're doing now is unheard of. I can feel the moment someone begins to track my scent. It curls around me. It's the awareness of someone following me, and all of the hair on the back of my neck stands on end. When Thorn drops down in front of me, his eyes red from a recent feeding, I'm suddenly aware of the blood all over his chin. He fed on something live. Someone rather. I can smell it on him. John, I say. I try not to let anything I say indicate that I can sense the change in him. He doesn't need to know. There's a frenzied wildness to a vampire who's recently fed, and I don't want to kill a friend of mine. Romulus, he says. We need to talk. He picked a hell of a time to speak to me. I know the timing, like most things, is intentional for him. He picked this moment as I'm alone with nowhere to turn, to ensure my undivided attention. About what? I ask, though I know it as surely as I know anything else. The bond, Thorn answers. It's my understanding that you intend to seal it tonight. I must say I didn't think you would. In fact, I hoped you would. Reject Miss Sumner. I trusted that you would remain your pig-headed self for the rest of the term, and when the time came she would die. Why do you want her dead? I ask. She's just a witch, a mere mortal. Surely someone as powerful as yourself would know she isn't a threat to you. I need to know you will remain a lone alpha, Romulus. He smiles at me, his fangs flashing in the moonlight. It's horrifying to look at him, feeling that thirst of his as if it were my own. You become too powerful and a war will arise between the clans. A strong alpha would mean the downfall of the vampires. So long as all of the alphas remain unmated, we're safe. I never realized how conniving Thorn was. All this time keeping the most powerful wolves on his staff, he could monitor us. There would be no bonds sealed and certainly no connections made on his watch. I bought his lies, believed his indifference toward me, and more so Grace. Let the girl die, he tells me. She's only a piece of ass, Romulus. The choice can be made who lives and dies. I've handled her. She's not dead yet. His choice of words reveals everything I need to know. So long as the choice remains unmade, she's alive and breathing. That means I can save her. I know he's got her somewhere, but I'm defiant at my core and I refuse to allow him to win. As long as I'm still breathing, so will Grace. I lunge at him, but he's faster than I am, and he smirks at me from where he now stands behind me, his eyes full of bloodlust. The crimson glow of them shines as red as the blood on his chin. You're not in your true form, Romulus, says Thorn. You can't hurt me. I grin. Maybe not, but you aren't the only one with a contingency plan. He frowns and I grab a stick from off the forest floor and bury it in his chest. Thorn picked the wrong path in the woods. Surrounded by elm the same wood that can incapacitate a bloodsucker if staked in the right place. He may have me unturned, but he also sits in the center of several weapons. A stake won't kill them, but it can put them to sleep long enough to buy me time, which is exactly what I need. I only have an hour to find Grace if we want to seal the bond before the time is up. Sure, the circumstances of attempted murder don't make the act romantic, but protecting her is the burden I bear, and I know I can't allow her to be hurt on my account. She has to be bonded to me or one of us dies. My mind is racing with her. Her name, her eyes, the way she smiles at me ignites a fire in my bones, making it impossible for me to look back and regret hurting Thorn. No matter how long we have been friends, I can't bring myself to care. She's more important than all of that, than anyone. I hear her scream, blood-curdling as it cuts through the trees, and I don't think. I just run. Thanks to my canine hearing, it's easy to follow the echo of the sound hot on her heels. As it reverberates through the trees, I chase her, desperate to get there in time. Chapter 19. Chapter 19. For witches, bonding rites are very specific rituals. I couldn't fathom doing the mating ceremony without ties to my ancestors as well, so I had planned the crystals I would bring into the woods to place in a circle for us to lie between. There was an art to everything. When I had spare time, and granted there wasn't much of it, I ventured into the library to conduct my research. I know witches have their own type of mating bond, a twin flame rite of passage, so I delved headfirst into it until I knew everything I needed to make tonight one to remember. I'm on cloud 9 as I run to my dorm. I put my heels in my hands so I don't have to balance in my ridiculous shoes as I climb the stairs to get to my dorm. I'm so alive and electrified with affection for Rome that I don't smell the blood in the air, not until it's too much for me to endure. One of the witches is a corpse in the hallway, and Paige is feeding. Takes me a second to realize what I'm seeing as the observation hits me. After the initial sight reverberates through my skull, I realize what I'm witnessing. My friend is devouring the throat of our neighbor, sucking her dry like she's the only source of water in a desert. The questions come in waves. Who turned her? What happened? Why is she suddenly so feral? The animalistic frenzy is so uncharacteristic for Paige, yet infinitely common for a new vamp. I'm only frightened she might turn on me next. Her eyes are red as she looks at me, but instead of lunging, she pauses. She opens her mouth, revealing fresh fangs that seem to burst uncomfortably from her gums. I can't ask her why or who turned her, because suddenly the vampire she's been hanging around, an impossibly beautiful girl, grabs me from behind and covers my mouth with her hand. All I can do is kick and scream as we rush too fast for me to process out of one of the tower windows. The glass rains down around us just before we hit the ground, cutting and slicing the skin exposed by my dress. I try to scream, but the sound is muffled by the vampire holding me. She manages to gag me with some kind of cloth, stifling whatever cries I can muster. No matter how much I thrash, I can't seem to break the grip. How could I? A vampire is stronger than a witch, since we're closer to humans than anything else. Paige was turned. That's all I can think about as we're rushing through the woods at a nauseating speed. The breakneck pace has me trembling. I am about to lose consciousness from the sheer dizziness coming over me in waves. My guess is she got home before I did, and to distract her, the vampire girlfriend currently taking me hostage turned her. It's a savage action, and a treasonous one. Vampires aren't welcome in a coven, so Paige will be cast out for a choice she didn't make. Her entire life is gone, a casualty because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time and ended up in a trap intended for me. The vamp girl strings me up in the trees when we reach the clearing. They're laughing maniacally, the whole nest of them, as they lick my blood off the grass where it drips. My arms are bound over my head, and I'm dangling an inch from the earth. Only the soles of my bare feet can touch the grass. My life is about to end in the same clearing where I told Rome to meet me. The irony isn't lost on me. 3 bloodsuckers have decided to surround me. Whoever ordered them here is yet to arrive, but they seem to be eagerly anticipating the arrival, chattering among themselves with hushed voices. What do they want from me? I know I haven't exactly won popularity contests with anyone at this school, but I know I haven't made enemies either. So, what's happening now? Why have they chosen to go after me? It doesn't make any sense in the first place, but trying to wrap my head around it isn't going to save my life. I have to think, and fast. I'm bound into being unable to speak. The fabric feels heavy on my tongue. No, I must have bitten myself because I taste iron pooling in my mouth around the gag. I can't speak. I can't scream aloud. All I can do is desperately push my cries of agony, begging for help through the bond. I'm not sure he can hear. I know a wolf can usually feel when his mate is in danger, but there's no telling if an unsealed bond can allow for the same effect. But what do the vampires need me for? I'm not a threat to them, and as far as I'm concerned, relationships between species have been harmonious for a century now. The reason the school exists is to strengthen that tradition, so why do I feel like everything is horribly amiss, like an undercurrent is ripping it apart? Rome, I think, pushing my plea through the bond. Help me. A new vampire enters the clearing, moving so fast the trees whistle when he cuts through them. Thorn is dead. What? One of the other boys, who I can't remember more than as a passing face, nervously glances around. What happened? He's been staked, the new vamp says. He didn't kill Professor Frey, which means he's going to be on his way here. We have to run, and we have to run now. Before any of them can move, a massive wolf tears out of the trees and rips the first vampire's head from his shoulders. Dismembering a vampire is the only proper way to kill them against all common misconceptions. Staking puts them in a coma, but beheading is an effective means of killing. The wolf, his fur gleaming with speckles of the gray in Professor Frey's hair, begins his attack. The second vamp goes down before the rest of them try to run. A blast of energy shoots through me, curving the trees so that one of the branches comes down and forces its way through the chest of the girl who had kidnapped me. Rome takes the advantage, tearing her apart as well, splattering her blood on the forest floor. He makes short work of the group. The wolf takes over entirely, hunting down the last of them. Younger vamps don't stand a chance against an alpha wolf, and when it comes to protecting a mate from a threat, there's nothing that can be done to stop him. The wolf doesn't negotiate. It consumes. I read in one of the books that an alpha connected enough with his wolf can transform at will, no longer confined to the moon. I have to assume the instinct, the cry I released through the bond, is what brought his wolf to the surface, making it possible for him to chase me down and rescue me when I thought beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was a goner. When it's over, my Rome comes out of the wolf form. He becomes a man. Again, without any regard for his nakedness. He climbs over one of the bodies and brings me down from the tree, catching me in his arms. Are you all right? He asks. He runs a hand over my cheek. Are you hurt? I shake my head. I'm okay, Rome. I'm okay. He crushes his mouth to mine, desperately whispering my name. It was Thorn. He wanted to make sure that we remained unmated. If the bond is unsealed, I won't become a powerful threat. I get the feeling the vampires want to reignite the clan wars, but they can't stand the thought of losing again. He's been at this for a long time, making sure no wolves are strong enough. I never expected Thorn, with all of his preaching about keeping us together and keeping the community of all of us magical beings close-knit, to actually want to reignite old conflicts. The fact he recruited other vampires, allowing this to happen, shocks me even further. What about the vampires? I ask. The treaty between clans states the terms explicitly. An attack on a pack, unprovoked, is cause for eliminating the threat. Thorn will be put on trial by the Magic Council. The blood is on his hands. Rome gently touches my face. We have to move. The bond. I curl up closer into his chest, kissing his neck. Take me somewhere safe. We end up at the lake, at the shallow end of the water. He stands behind me, gently unzipping the scraps of my beautiful dress to reveal my undergarments. Then he unclasps my bra, moving his fingertips over my chest. His mouth is against my neck, feeling my heart race as he hooks his thumbs around the band of my panties and lets them fall to the ground. The water is cool over my skin, washing away the blood and dirt. Does the same for him, cleansing him of what he was forced to do. His body is all corded muscle and taut skin. As I watch the water roll over him, I'm filled with a want for him I've never experienced before. Beyond mere lust is something deeper, bringing us closer to one another. I was afraid you couldn't hear me, I confess. The world is quiet except for the water lapping at the shore. In the stillness of this moment, I'm aware of new physical sensations. I'm aware of my skin, or how my heart pulses in my chest like it's trying to break against my ribs. I'm aware of everything I feel, how much of me is devoted to him. In this moment, I feel infinite, like I'm connected to the natural world almost as much as I'm connected to him. He looks at me, his eyes so green they shine in the dark. I'll always hear you, he says. Whenever things seem dark and scary, I'll be there at your call. You know that, right? I do now. Do you think Paige knew how one of us would die when she foretold it? I dare to wonder. Would that be crazy? He shakes his head. Water flicks around him in a motion that reminds me oddly of a dog. I think often that prophecies are just pieces of the puzzle, especially if they're accidentally given. I doubt she could have known. Thinking of her, knowing that everything has changed for her, makes my chest ache. They turned her. When the vamps tried to kidnap me, they turned her. Because she happened to be home first. She trusted them and thought they were her friends. Her whole life is going to be different now because she knew me. He shakes his head. It's not your fault, baby. You couldn't have known. Paige has been turned into someone else because she knew me. I feel like I've failed her somehow. Not all vampires are evil. Paige will find her own place. He gently reaches for me, tilting my chin so that our eyes meet. His are so soft as he looks at me. Hey, it's going to be okay. None of this was your fault. Truthfully, I know it isn't, but it still rattles around in my brain. The guilt, the shame, the wondering if I should have known. If a number of things had changed ever so slightly, could it all have been different? Unfortunately, I don't know, and all we have is the present. We don't have to do this, he assures me. The bond, we can find another way. I want to, I say. I have to. The bond demands to be sealed under the light of the moon. He kisses me, our naked bodies pressed together to the sound of the waves of the lake that ripple under the same eclipse. When it comes time for him to transform again, the eclipse is set to happen. I can feel the magic crackling in the air around us. He kisses my mouth hard and demanding. His arms are strong around my waist. I feel every inch of him against me, bringing forward a wave of energy and power I've never felt before. We stumble out of the water and onto the beach. He lays me down before him. His body over mine is warm, and the heat of his skin contrasting the chill of the water makes my toes curl. I push my hands into his hair, knotting my fingers where it curls at the nape of his neck. He nibbles gently on my bottom lip and I gasp. His tongue slips into my mouth, and all of the worries in my mind go quiet. Are you sure? He whispers. I nod. I arch my back, my chest against his, the softest parts of me against the hard lines of his chest. His fingertips begin to wander, pressing into my thighs with intensity. When he shifts, running his hand along the more delicate parts of me, I can barely contain the sound slipping out of my mouth. He knows what he has to do to rile me up. We've had enough practice, him and I, at this. I cry out, whimpering against him as he brings his mouth up for another kiss and starts to pump his finger in and out of me, bringing me closer and closer to a pleasure I hadn't known before him. When I moan, he catches it in my mouth, dips his lips to the shell of my ear, and says, "You don't have to be quiet, baby. There's no one out here but us." By the time I'm trembling beneath him, anxious for more, he's all too happy to oblige. Slowly he eases himself inside of me, and a flash of memories flood through my vision and interrupt my wild mind. The first day of school. Him in the hallway looking like sin. The first time he gave me a book. The magic lesson that changed the way I saw him, the spark that bloomed in the darkness. The moment I knew I was his mate when magic crackled out of me in a way it never has before. We are snapshots and highlight reels, coming together across the expanse of my eyelids like a daydream. He's everything to me, perfect and consuming and overwhelming. The exhilaration of loving him, though, that outweighs all else. Our bodies seem to answer to one another, reaching into the empty space and colliding together in a moment of music, with the roll of his hips over mine, and the way his body comes into mine and crashes like the sea. A golden thread of magic wraps around us. As I draw closer to the edge, he does too. The bond seems to be growing stronger, swelling like music, and when I finally trip into bliss, he's right behind me. He laughs against the shell of my ear when it's over, then slowly removes himself from me, holding me in his arms. There are sparks in my veins and I feel like I've swallowed a shooting star, delightfully ablaze in the best way. The bond is stronger than ever. We did it, Rome, I whisper. He nods. Yes, we did. So you love me, I murmur. So I do, he says back. I'm not sure how it was ever a doubt. It takes me a moment to recover once the act is finished. For a while it feels like the cord between our magic is a live wire with a current running through it. Once the moon finally reaches its pinnacle, he departs from me, and the wolf rises out of him with more ease than I've ever seen anyone transform with before. Before he runs into the woods, he glances at me for one final moment, bowing his head to me in a silent goodbye. I dress in what's left of my clothes and wander back to his cottage. When I collapse into bed, I sleep like the dead. Paige holds a parasol over her head. Early the next morning, we're sitting on the lawn before most of the students are up for the day. When the hour is early, the sun is more forgiving on the skin of a new vampire. I know she doesn't want people to see her this way, not before she's fully come to terms with herself. I think she's beautiful too, and even more untouchable now. Do you think everything has changed now? Paige asks. I mean, I don't feel all that different, but I know I am. I think you're just as amazing now as you were when we first met, I say. I do have a much longer lifespan, she remarks. Imagine all the concerts I'll be able to see now. Score one for being undead. I know vampires are immortal, but witches tend to live longer than your average Joe too. I don't need to dampen her mood or ruin her silver lining, so I nod and agree. What a life she can live now. Everything about her may not be different, but everything about me, about this world is. Now that the bond has been sealed between Rome and I, everything feels different. The buzz in the nature surrounding campus is stronger, more electrified. The university has been closed by the Council of Magic, the only thing close to a governing body for people like us. Rome's statement was taken about the incident, and all of the other vampires were taken into law enforcement custody for statements. The scheme of Headmaster Thorne runs deep, and until all of the vamps have been investigated, there's no telling what he'd planned once he'd subdued all of the alpha wolves. I know Rome doesn't want to tell me everything out of fear of upsetting me. I can feel his concern in the bond, as real as a hand holding mine. Paige's skin, once bronze with olive tones, is distinctly gaunt and pale. Beneath the heavy frames of her sunglasses are the new crimson eyes she'll be sporting for a while. Now that she's fed the first time, she should be able to control her cravings more. She looks at me, smiling with her lips closed tight over her teeth. I knew you and Professor Frey would work things out. The bond is stronger today. Can smell the magic. She reaches into her purse and pulls out her tarot cards, extending them to me. I can't take these, Paige, I say, surprised that she'd even consider giving them to me. I know how much they mean to her, how hard it is for her to give them up. Still, she's offering them, waving them a little with a stubborn insistence. I want you to have them, she replies. I don't connect with them the same way anymore. I'm sorry, I tell her. If I'd known, she would have turned me anyway, Paige says, interrupting me before I can spiral into an apology that would comfort no one. She told me as much before she did it. Thorne had indoctrinated all of them into thinking they would rule campus once he got rid of you and weakened Frey into a lapdog. The fucking bloodsuckers just followed him. You would have thought he was Jesus or something. I know it's a stereotype, but I'm surprised she can even say Jesus, given that vampires are supposed to be monsters scorned and cursed by the gods. I'm sure all of that is as much a load of crap as the other stereotypes magical beings have said against them, but I can't deny I heard it all growing up. He's not dead, is he? I ask. Thorn was incapacitated last I checked, but the real damage was done to the vamps holding me captive, while Rome is avoiding advertising what he did to save me. I'm sure it'll get around enough to make him notorious, and taking out a player like Thorn will afford him godlike rumors. I'm surprised he didn't kill him, to be honest. I'm sure Rome and his wolf's more primal instincts disagreed about that call. Staked and coffined, she replies. They're probably gonna interrogate him. Once they get the body back to New York, the council is stationed there. They'll want to know if another clan feud is going to happen. Personally, I'd be rooting for the wolves. As a car approaches the driveway, honking its horn at Paige, she turns and gives me a one-armed hug, her skin terribly cold. If we find a cure, send me back my cards. Otherwise, take good care of them. I'm going to miss you, I tell her, and I mean it. Even with what's happened, she still seems as bubbly as the day I met her. Less warm, but the parts of Paige I remember best are still with her. I'll definitely be writing her letters. Keep in touch, she says. If you ever want to go clubbing, I'm your nocturnal gal. After depositing her bags in the trunk, she blows me a kiss and climbs into the passenger seat of the car. I watch it shrink on the way up the winding road back into the hills for the descent down to California. I don't know what life will be like now that I'm leaving Pacific Academy, but I hope it'll only be better. After everything I've been through to connect with my magic and make myself stronger, I deserve to enjoy what comes next, the good and the bad.